to chat.
Hello all. I'm going to just take off my mask while we're doing this. So my name is, and sorry for all of you that are joining us. We had a few technical difficulties while trying to figure out how to work this technology. It's definitely been a wonderful learning curve for all of us to learn all this new tech. So my name is Miss Brooke, and if you have not gotten a chance to see the live, or I should say the pre-recorded bee inspection, that is in our Bug Day YouTube playlist. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to put anything in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about bees. So I am one of the staff naturalists. Again, my name is Miss Brooke. So I'm one of the staff naturalists. I've been working at Rare Nature Center for about 3 years now as a full-time naturalist. I typically go out and do outreach programs into schools, and I also meet audiences within various Milwaukee County parks for programs. So I actually started my journey into becoming a naturalist here at Rare Nature Center when I was 11 years old. And I had awesome mentors and things like that. So I came here back to Rare Nature Center, like I said, about 3 years ago, but I was lucky to spend 6 years of my career down in Land Between Lakes National Recreational Area, which is located in Western Kentucky. And how I got into beekeeping is one of my next door neighbors, actually, his name was Hoyt Jones. He had the big Langstroth boxes, as you may have seen in our video. And I asked him, I'm like, are those bee boxes? And he was like, yeah. So we got talking, and he actually took me on a tour of his apiary. So an apiary is what we often call a bee yard. So it's an area that's set up specifically for the honeybees with their boxes where they can go out and forage. And you can have a small apiary, or you can have a large apiary. I've known beekeepers who keep well over 1,000 bees in different locations. That they're what we call commercial beekeepers. So there's commercial beekeepers, there's hobbyists who just do it because they like doing it. So one of the things that I do here at Rare Nature Center is I help to manage our hives here. So we actually have 3 hives here at Rare Nature Center, and then we have typically when we are occupied in our building with visitors on a regular basis, we have an observation hive. So that has a plexiglass sides on both sides, and we have 9 frames. Those are the things that you pull out. And those are 9 frames in that observation hive where you can actually see the bees working, and they get to go outside and gather pollen and nectar from the flowers outside, and then they bring it back into our observation hive. So that is what I do. And I have a few tools with me, but let me kind of explain where do bees sleep? Well, that is a good question, Amelia. So bees actually, honeybees do sleep in their hive. Now, it's not like true sleep that we might do because honeybees are pretty much active all the time. During the nighttime, they're not maybe quite as active, but bees do their best work in the dark, I find. So they like to be in their hive when it's dark, and that's where they do their best work. So just because it's not daytime, they're still probably working a little bit inside the hive. But during the daytime, they typically go out and forage and look for nectar and pollen to bring back to the hive, which is their food. So hopefully that answers your question. So I think beekeeping is great, and one of the reasons why I do it is for education. So a couple of years ago, actually, we developed a program called the Buzz About Bees, and we were awarded a grant called Sponsor a Hive grant from the Honeybee Conservancy. And we got some equipment from them. We already had a whole bunch of equipment, but my fellow staff members here, we developed a outreach program in which we took our live bees in a portable observation hive where it was completely safe that we could bring into the schools to teach about bees. So that is one of the things that we do here at Weir Nature Center is when we do programs, we can actually bring live bees to your school or another presentation, which is pretty amazing. So honeybees are really, really cool, and they get a lot of accolades in the media, the news media. Everybody is very concerned about the decline of honeybees because they do make honey and they do lots of other things like taking pollen from one flower and moving it to another one, which is great because it helps us to get foods. So like things like your fruits and vegetables that you eat at home are pollinated by bees. But in Wisconsin, we actually have about 400 to 500 different types of bees. And if you attended Barrett Klein or Dr. Barrett Klein's program, he may have mentioned that, that honeybees were brought over about 400 years ago in the 1600s. And they were brought over by Europeans to pollinate the seeds and the plants that they brought over from Europe. So that is the reason why honeybees have been brought over. But we do have, like I mentioned, 400 to 500 different types of bees that live in Wisconsin. So they need our attention too, because many of them are in decline as well, especially some of our bumblebee species like the rusty patch bumblebees that we do have in the state of Wisconsin and actually are present in our Milwaukee County parks. And someone asked, what pests do your beehives get and how do you deal with them? Oh, this is Amelia's dad. So some different pests that we get in our hive, we can potentially, the worst one that we could get, in my opinion, is called a Varroa Mite. And it kind of looks like a wood tick, but its body is different. But what it does, it attaches itself to the underside of a bee, so on its abdomen, and it slurps up the hemolymph, which is basically insect blood from the bees, and it can give them diseases and things like that. So a stronger, more hygienic hive is going to be able to potentially deal with the mites. But beekeepers use a spray, and it's you have to have special like personal protection that you're wearing. And what you do is there is I think it is a spray or like a smoke. It's oxalic acid. So one of our volunteers, his name is Robert McKinney. He is also a beekeeper, and he actually came to our center, I think within this past week, and sprayed our hives with oxalic acid, and that will hopefully knock down the mite load, and that will help our bees to hopefully overwinter and be present next spring. Some other pests that they can get in them are small hive beetles. We have had them present in the state of Wisconsin. Actually, at one of our hives that we work with off of Rawson Avenue in Oak Creek, we did find the presence of small hive beetles, but that's typically not such a huge deal in Wisconsin as it is in places like the South, like Kentucky and Tennessee, where it is more of an issue. And then there are the small wax moths that get in there. And again, that is where you have not such a strong hive where they can get in there and cocoon and burrow through the wax and eat the wax and go to the bathroom all inside the hive. That happens typically with a hive, a colony that is not as strong. So we always want to make sure that we have really good, healthy, strong hives. Sometimes that requires feeding them. So right now, we have a fair amount of flowers still out for them to forage. We have lots of different goldenrods. We have lots of asters. So that is something they can still forage from. But right now, what we have done is within the past week, we've removed any of the honey supers that were on our hives, and we'll clean up the honey. And you may ask, is the honey for sale? I get that a lot. We don't sell our honey because we don't actually produce enough for selling to the public. So it is a sweet gift that we give all of our staff members to take home. So that is what we do with our bees and our honey. So we took those honey supers off, and then we feed a mixture of sugar and water to our bees mixed with some other essential oils. I think spearmint and lemongrass are two of the ones that we use the most, and that is helps them with hygienics. They really like that mixture of essential oils to help them. So that is what we have as far as pests. About when will honeybees stop foraging? So it's really interesting in the fact that what looks like a blooming flower doesn't always, it is not necessarily what looks good to a pollinator. So yes, we have lots of flowers still around. So I would say probably September, October is when they are going to stop foraging. Now they're going to still be creating honey from what they are gathering, but we still give them supplemental feedings because we want to have enough for them. So again, what looks like a blooming flower to us may not have sufficient nectar that they can pull from. So September, October is probably the time when we see the flowers kind of dwindling down in our prairie areas here at Ware Nature Center. Any other questions that we're having right now? So again, the primary reason why we have bees at Ware Nature Center is a lot of people are very, very interested in honeybees. And that's why we have them here as primarily for education. And like I mentioned earlier, we do have other bees in the state of Wisconsin, the 400 to 500 different species. And I'm actually active with our Milwaukee County Natural Areas Department on a bumblebee monitoring program. I know this is a honeybee talk, but we want to talk about our other native pollinators as well. And the Milwaukee County Parks Natural Areas Department would love any of you who are in the area to potentially become volunteer bumblebee monitors. So we work actually with the Bumblebee Brigade out. It's a program that is a citizen science project, or I should say community science project by the Wisconsin DNR. And we send all our data that we collect to them, and that is how they are researching and finding out more information about our bumblebee species. We actually have about 20 different species of bumblebees in the state of Wisconsin. 5 of those being cuckoo bees or cuckoo bumblebees, and they actually are brood parasites of the regular honey bumblebees. I'm sorry. And how do you mark the queen bees? Very, very carefully. So there are special apparatuses in which to capture the queen bee within the hive, where you can actually get her underneath the little plastic thing. And then you take a marker and mark her abdomen. I mean, not her abdomen, but her thorax. So that is, the head, thorax and the abdomen on your belly, that's their abdomen. So we mark the back of their thorax, and the colors vary from year to year. So depending on what year it is, you mark it with that specific color. And then that helps you to remember the age of your queen. The oldest living queen that they ever discovered in a hive that was actually still producing was roughly 9 years old. Typical lifespan for a queen bee is going to be 3 to 5 years. A lot of people who have been doing beekeeping for many, many years, they actually can grab the queen bee by her back legs, and mark her that way where you're actually holding her. You never ever want to grasp onto the front legs, because if you inadvertently hurt her front legs, it's bad. That is how she measures the size of the cell. So if you've ever seen the hexagon, or I'm sorry, octagon shape within a hive, they are actually different sizes. So depending on the size of those cells that the worker bees or her daughters create, she is going to determine that size with her legs, and then she is going to lay either an egg that has been fertilized or an unfertilized egg. So the unfertilized eggs will become the drones, and the fertilized eggs become the worker bees. So for lack of a better word, the drone bees are essentially a clone of that queen. They have no father. It's just all the queen's genetics. So what they do is lay those eggs, and the bigger the cell, that is going to be a drone cell, and the smaller cells are going to be the worker cells. So she's going to measure with her front legs. It says color to keep track. Okay, so those are some different things about beekeeping. If any of you are interested in beekeeping and want to learn more too, we have a few different organizations in the area. There's the Waukesha, Milwaukee County Beekeepers Association. There's a few Facebook groups, like the Milwaukee Urban Beekeeping group. And my friend Robert McKinney is kind of like the admin for that group. But it is to find a mentor, someone who's been doing beekeeping for quite a while. That's how I started out when I lived in Kentucky. Again, I went to beekeeping school, and I studied for a while under my friend Kent Williams, who's an excellent beekeeper. He's actually a master beekeeper. And you want to find a mentor, because you might decide after a while that you don't want to keep bees. It isn't a thing for you to undertake. It is a time commitment. So if any of you have dogs or cats at home, or any other pets, it is in a way like taking care of a pet. Granted, you don't necessarily have to feed the bees all the time. Typically you feed them in the spring and in the fall to help them when there's not as many nectar resources. But it is a commitment. You have to treat them for mites. It's like taking your cat or dog to the vet and making sure that they have all their shots. So if you're not willing to take that commitment of potentially being the caretaker of these 10,000 bees, then maybe that isn't exactly for you to do. So going and studying with a mentor. Also, you have to think about how much it's going to take to the cost of the bees. So the equipment for itself, like standard equipment for one hive, it's about $200. And then bees range in prices each year. You can get, and I forgot my props. I should have grabbed a few props. You can get this thing called a nucleus, and it's basically a mini hive. So it's 5 frames, whereas a beehive is typically 9 to 10 frames in a hive. Those big Langstroth hives. So you can either purchase a nucleus, which is 5 frames, and it's awesome because you have a queen that's already laying eggs. You have worker bees in there that are getting like nectar and pollen and bringing all the resources that you need in order to really get going. Or you can buy a package of bees. So typically a package of bees is you can get a 3-pound package. You could get it, I think, sometimes a 2-pound package, depending on where you're buying bees. And you can start out with that, and you're just getting the queen and basically a bunch of workers. And it might not necessarily be her or their queen, the worker bee's queen. So that is why you have to have the queen in her queen cage, so the worker bees that are in that package don't attack the queen and kill her. Queen bees aren't the rulers that they're made out to be. So if a queen bee is not doing her job properly, the worker bees can sting her and actually kill her if she's not doing her job as the queen. So that is something that you should think about too, is what if you would want to become a beekeeper, if it's going to be a package or a nucleus. But the queen bee is not the ruler of the realm. It's really the worker bees. They do all the work. The queen bee is responsible for one job and one job only, and that is laying eggs. And she will lay 1,000 to 2,000 eggs per day, which is insane to think about. And that is during peak season, which when we get all the floral resources coming up, that is really peak season for our bees and gathering that nectar and pollen. So I will say that bees have actually been named the most important creature on planet Earth in their role in pollination. So I believe it's 80% of plants in the world. I think it's roughly 80%. 80% of the plants in the world require some form of pollination. Now, they're not all going to be pollinated by bees, but bees are, to my knowledge, and from what I've read, are the only creature on planet Earth that really need pollen from flowers for reproduction. So that means that pollen is kind of like meat. That pollen is meat. So when you think about meat and potatoes, that protein that they need is from the pollen, and they have to bring that back to their hive so their young, their offspring, can have something to eat. So, and the rest of the hive will eat that too. But it's really important for the production of their babies. And the potato part is the nectar. So the nectar for honeybees will get mixed with different things in their saliva, the worker bees' saliva, and there's a lot of evaporation that happens where they take a good portion of the water out and leave the sugar behind, that sticky stuff. So that is basically the carbohydrates or the potatoes that they need in order to survive. And we have 5 viewers, and I just wanted to check in. Are there any questions that are going that anybody has at this point on what's going on? Nope. So, like I said, I mentioned finding a mentor, considering costs for beekeeping. The next thing you should really find out if you are inclined to think about if you want to become a beekeeper is your county ordinances. So not every county and not every city is going to permit a person to having bees in their own backyard. And to talk to your neighbors. So talk to your neighbors first and really, really talk with them and educate them that bees are not necessarily going to want to sting you. They sting once and they're done, and it is a form of defense. So what we are having, John has asked what strains of honeybees are kept at Where Nature Center and why those strains. So that's an excellent question. So we actually have two varieties here at Where Nature Center, two strains. So we have two hives that are Italians, and we have one that is a Carniolan. So Italians are known to be kind of what beekeepers start out with. That is the strain that most beekeepers start out with because they are considered to be more docile than some of the other strains of bees. And we have those, and then we have the Carniolan, and they're supposedly more winter hardy for Wisconsin winters. So those are the two strains that we have. Now, we've had success with both strains here at Where Nature Center, and that's what we have. But really, it's interesting too because depending on where you're getting your bees from, like our queen out of the Carniolan hive is definitely a lot darker than the Italian hive, which is more of your typical like black and yellow, well, not really black and yellow, but brown and yellow, that really golden honeybee look. That's what the Italian honeybees look like. So the queen out of the Carniolan is a lot darker, and that's the more winter hardy one. So the queen actually will mate with up to 12 different drones, sometimes more, but really 12 is probably the most desirable number. And she is doing that purely from a diversity of genetics. So it's opening up that gene pool. So when she has eggs and they emerge as adult workers or drones, they are actually going to show some of the characteristics of both their queen mother as well as the male. So the queen could have other genetics within her than what is being shown as far as her body color. So really, genetics play a part. So not all worker bees are going to look the same color in a hive. Typically, you might have what looks to be an Italian queen, but she may have daughters that are exhibiting Carniolan looks to them. So really, also like Dr. Barrett Klein was mentioning in honeybees, you might have a strain of honeybees that's the same, but you could have two different hives that have two different behaviors, and that's very true. Really, the behavior of a hive is totally determined by the queen. So if you have every time you go out into a hive and open it up and you have an extremely, extremely aggressive hive that you can't get near it every time you go to check on it, it is due to the queen. So often people will, if they have a very aggressive queen, what they do is actually they will have another queen in the lineup in a queen cage. Again, you want to have her in a queen cage. And what we do is put a little marshmallow in there. There's a cork, and you poke it out, and then you put a marshmallow in there. And the worker bees will chew that out within 72 hours. But you really want to remove that queen that is very, very aggressive and take her out of the equation and replace her with a more docile queen, because it really does calm down the hive quite a bit if you have a different queen in there. If they just won't let up where you can check on the hive. As I call it, it's being more aware of the beekeeper. And if they're more aware of the beekeeper than average, where you just can't get near there, that's a problem. Now, I will say bees are just like humans. They have their happy days and they have their grumpy days. So some days they are are grumpy, and the next day that you check on them, they could totally have a normal, happy day where they're really nice and calm. With these 2 hives that we have out, or 3 hives that we have out here, I haven't had that issue. They've been overall pretty calm. But you can have some that they just don't want to have you checking on them at all, on a consistent basis, and that's where you remove the queen. But like I said, they have their separate personalities, so they can have their bad day and they have a good day, just like humans can. So it all might be determined by weather too. So the reason why we're not doing a hive inspection today live is because it's raining out. You also don't want to check a honeybee hive when it is really cold out or damp in general, because it's not a good day for them. Really, you want to check it out when it's sunny, and a little bit of overcast is not a problem. But if it's sunny out, you're going to have more worker bees out in the field foraging, and that is the best time, because less bees in the hive out foraging means that you're less inclined to get stung. And I will say I have gotten stung before. I've never really had a super, problem with allergies or anything like that. But that is just one of the job risks. I do wear gloves with me. So I have my gloves here. They're goat skin gloves. These are actually made not specifically for me, but they are children's beekeeping gloves. Yes, they actually do make children's beekeeping gloves. And I have really, really small hands, and I had to have the small gloves, because you want to be able to feel what you're doing in a hive. I have my Hive Tool here. My teacher, Kent Williams, this is actually his patented Hive Tool. He would take normal Hive Tool, the pry bar, and weld this section on here, and it really does a wonderful job of lifting up the frames. And then I have my suit. It's just basically a jacket, and this protects my face. So there's a lot of beekeepers that I know that will work with bees that just work basically with the veil and not the jacket, and they work with no gloves so they can feel what they're doing. So can you tell which honey you produce when you feed the bees from? Okay, which honey is produced when you feed the bees from the honey from their flower foraging? So, and I'm not a commercial beekeeper, so I can't really speak enough about this. But there are different honeys that you can purchase in the grocery store. So I forget which book it was, but there is a book I read about a beekeeper, and he actually would have honey tasting parties. So one of my favorites is, and John is saying orange flower honey is delicious, and it is. My favorite is Tupelo honey. So that honey comes down from south, I think it's Florida, that has a lot of Tupelo trees. So any honey that we would find here at Weir Nature Center would really be considered to be wildflower honey. But they definitely, depending on what they're bringing in, it is going to have a different taste. There's buckwheat honey. There is safflower honey. So that it isn't going to be 100% of that one plant, but it probably will have a little bit of mixture from other plants. But beekeepers know where to put their hives in an area where they have a desired flow of nectar from a specific plant. So John had mentioned locust honey is good, and it has a weird aftertaste. So locust honey is actually a desired honey that desired nectar to become a honey down in Kentucky, from one of my friends. I mean, there's other areas that have locust trees, but that is a desired honey as well. So like I said, here it would be considered to be wildflower honey, but the goldenrods that are blooming right now, anything that would come off from the golden rods as far as honey, if we would have left our supers on, would definitely have a different taste. When I was living in Kentucky, we had our observation hive, we actually had nodding wild onion, which is a native plant, and they were bringing in pollen and nectar in from the nodding wild onion, and it actually smelled up our room where the observation hive was located. So it had this really like weird oniony taste. So I can't imagine what that would taste like. It was an undescribable smell. It wasn't like terrible, but it wasn't a nice smell either. So depending on what flowers are in an area, it definitely can skew to one end to another. So there are different tasting honeys for sure. And it is 3:46. I don't know if any of you have any further questions, if I've answered all the burning questions that you've had. I hope next year we are fully open at some point in time and you can actually come and see our observation hive. It's pretty cool. I know the Milwaukee County Zoo in their children's area or the ag area, they actually have an observation hive as well. It's kind of like a big building that's outside where the bees can go in and out. So observation hives are pretty cool. Any other questions that are looming out there? Nope. And I forgot to mention, September is actually National Honey Month, which is very appropriate to have Bug Day in a National Honey Month, or as one of my friends calls it, National Vomit Month, Honeybee Vomit Month, because honey is kind of, I don't want to turn you off of honey because it's delicious, but it is essentially bee vomit. They actually have a honey stomach and then a regular stomach, and the honey stomach or the honey crop is where the nectar goes, and they spit the nectar in and out until they evaporate a good portion of that water, as well as fanning their wings over it, and that's how we get that sticky deliciousness. Yum! My coworker in the back is laughing. Yes. So I want to thank you all. This is our last presentation for our live presentation for Bug Day Live, or our virtual Bug Day. If you do have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. Typically, we do have at least one staff naturalist here per day, and we do have a phone where you can call and talk to us. So we do have at least one naturalist here per day where you can ask questions. And please have fun with the other YouTube videos on our Bug Day playlist. And we also have handouts to go with each program. So like our Caterpillar's Lunchbox has things that are go with that. We have the moth program, Pop-Up Nature, Marvelous Moths. We have handouts that go with those. Our the RB Dragons program, we have handouts that go with those. So each program has a handouts that go with it. So if you want to go out and explore nature on your own, you have all those tools in your toolbox to use at your disposal that our staff have come up with. And don't forget the Where Nature Center Adventure Challenge that will be starting, I believe, tomorrow. So you should totally check that out. We have more information on our website at friendsofware.org. All right. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you eventually in person, hopefully next year, but we'll have a in-person bug day. Bye.